Hey, it's Drybear. We're now a couple days into the launch of Season 1 Dragonflight, both PvE and PvP. And what I wanted to do is something that I love doing. I've done it for other games and I'll do it for this one too, is talk about class popularity. So today we're gonna look at PvE specifically. We'll look at which classes are being picked the most for Mythic Plus and for Raid on the available difficulties. We'll exclude Mythic Raid just because it's going to be in flux and people are going to be picking what's good rather than kind of a representation of what's being played the most. So let's dive into which classes, which specializations are being played the most, and unfortunately, which ones are not being played at all. Comment down below what your predictions are, or if there's anything that surprised you about these statistics. If you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. All right, let's move into the stats. This is going to be done by parses. There are many ways to collect popularity statistics in a game like World of Warcraft. There's different lenses that you would use to view that data. The one that I find to be the most viable is whether or not people have completed endgame content using that class or specialization, not necessarily people that have leveled it to 70 but haven't logged in, or people that have specific eye levels. It's like, have they finished content that is measurable? So starting with Mythic Plus, we'll go healer, tank, and then DPS through Mythic Plus, and then we'll go into raid. So start with healers. I've been playing, I have all healer classes at level 70 right now, every single one of them, and I've been playing them all through M Plus and all that. So I wanted to start kind of where where my most recent experience the last few days has been. This is the Mythic Plus healer popularity, and again, this is not how well they're performing. I'll make that a separate video and we'll go through which classes are doing the best. This is which are just being used and in play the most. And this, honestly, there's only one or two shocking things on here. The first thing to talk about is just Restoration Druid and Preservation Evoker. I'm actually shocked for Mythic Plus how disparate Restoration Druid is. Like, the deviation of Restoration Druid from the other healer specs is pretty massive. You can see small changes going up here for each of these. A nice jump for preservation, and then from restoration to priest, holy priest is quite measurable as well. And then druid is just, it takes the cake. Now, Resto Druid has always been good at M+. They're very flexible. They have stealth. They have stampeding roar. They have battle res. They have very flexible mobile healing. They can ramp up their healing, or they can, have steady healing. They do decent damage as well. So, them being up here isn't too crazy. It's just how big of a difference it is. So Resto Druid dominating M+. And I would actually argue right now for Mythic Plus, Resto Druid and Preservation Evoker are the two best healers by a long shot. So it's interesting to see that so visually represented here, but we'll stick to popularity for today. Preservation Evoker being the second, Holy Paladin being the third. And I wish Holy Paladin was kind of up with Resto Druid and Preservation. I think Holy Paladin is the third best healer for Mythic Plus. They just are very cooldown reliant. So if you mismanage your big cooldowns on Holy Paladin, if your wings aren't available at the right time, or you don't have really big procs, or you didn't manage your holy power, or you didn't get your Dawn buff right when you needed to start spending, it can be really punishing, and you can almost feel like a wet noodle. But if you have the procs, you get free wings, or you have wings available, you can do some crazy bonkers healing in Mythic Plus. The next one is the first surprising aspect of this is Holy Priest. I mean, I guess it's not too surprising since Holy Priest is quite popular in Raid and overall is one of the most straightforward healers. Holy Priest has always been popular. It's just Holy Priest has not really, for a long time, has not really been a big favorite for Mythic Plus, mostly because they're incredibly squishy. They die to AoE mechanics all the time. If you're a Holy Priest, I call my Holy Priest the toilet paper mage. They're just wrapped in toilet paper, and they've convinced themselves that that's the armor that's going to keep them safe, and it never does. They just die all the time. They're so squishy. But they have decent healing. They have some new damage options. You can use your Holy Word bonuses to get some extra Holy Fires out there. You have a new ability in the top right of your spec tree that allows you to do three Holy Fires in a row with a stacked dot. They have decent AoE and decent healing and on-demand healing. So I'm surprised to see Holy Priest this popular in Mythic Plus. Resto Shaman down below that. Resto Shamans have been struggling since the beta and haven't really climbed too much, but people are still preferring to play them. There are some people that are diehard class fans. We'll probably see that some strewn about the stats today, going through, as people just say, I want to play Resto Shaman. They have a decent kit. They have Bloodlust. Only 2 healers on this list. Resto Shaman and Preservation Evoker have Bloodlust. Only 2 of them have Battle Res, Resto Druid and Holy Paladin, now that Holy Paladin has Battle Res. But Resto Shaman being there. And then the bottom ones are Mistweaver and Discipline. I was so excited about my Mistweaver from beta, and I am seeing some pretty glaring holes in my Mistweaver in the week 1, season 1 launch. I'm actually wondering if I'm going to be maining Mistweaver for the first season, because it's rough. It is very painful to play them as it stands, but that's a whole other video to talk about. And the Discipline at the bottom. I don't know why Discipline's not being liked. They lost some big things in Shadowlands. We don't have the Spirit Shell anymore, which is kind of a bummer. Their damage is decent. I think this is just a throughput problem. I think they have all the tools. They have more tools than they've ever had. It's no longer atonement spam. I think they just need a nice little throughput boost. Moving right along, let's talk about Mythic Plus tanks. I want this video to not be too long. This one, no surprise, Protection Warrior. Protection Warrior has been strong all throughout the beta and stayed that way. They are just incredibly good. They have a button for everything, insane damage. They're very strong. I wonder if they're going to be getting the nerf bat, but we'll see. So far, they've been holding steady. Vengeance is popular. Demon Hunters are popular in general, so you'll see more of these here. And I think people like playing the more damage, more mobile aspect of Vengeance. Plus, it's cool to have the spikes and Metamorphosis and playing off your fragments. I think it's fun to play Vengeance, so you'll see more of that. Then in the middle, you have Guardian, Blood, and Protection Paladin. I would put them kind of in their own statistical clump. They're right there in the middle. They're about the same. Guardian a little bit ahead, maybe because Druid is a little more popular. Blood, and then Protection Paladin. We saw Protection Paladin and Brewmaster struggling the most, ending the beta. And even in the first 2 weeks of launch prior to the season launch, we saw that as well. And then we did see a small nerf to both of them. I'm not sure why they lost some defense there, but just less popular here. And then down at the bottom is Brewmaster. Brewmaster does incredible damage, insane damage. Their AoE damage is bonkers. They have more keg abilities and more AoE abilities and more resets than they've had before. And they do tons of AoE damage, but they are a little bit harder to play, more nuanced. Mastering Stagger takes a long time and a lot of practice. And if you play it poorly, you actually are quite squishy. But I would kind of say that about Protection Paladin as well, though you don't see them down as low. They're kind of in that middle clump. Protection Paladin, if you mismanage your cooldowns or you don't play it right, it can be rough. Blood and Guardian are probably the easier. A lot of self-healing, a lot of buttons. Guardian, Druid, very straightforward. But this is the popularity spread for Mythic Plus for tank. Moving on to Mythic Plus Melee DPS. Shout out to survival mains. Oh man, you can see the bar down there. There's a bar. It's real. There's blue. It's there. But oh my god, Havoc and Fury. This kind of represents just warriors and demon hunters being popular in general. Super high at the top. Windwalker, very strong. Windwalker is probably my favorite iteration of Windwalker in a long time. They play really fast. They have high burst. And they have a cleaner rotation, and it's nice to have some of the Legion abilities back. Strike of the Windlord or whatever it's called. Outlaw is the next one, and I would put these 4 on the top. They're Outlaw, super cool. That Outlaw is my favorite rogue spec, so it's nice to see that one there. I'm shocked to see it so popular, because a lot of people have been griping about the random stats and random buffs and the RNG that you have in Outlaw, but I guess it's not enough to turn them away, so very popular. Unholy DK beats out Frost DK by a lot. Unholy DK kind of in the middle here with Enhancement Shaman, and then doing quite well. You can see Frost DK much further down towards like that third section of the cohort. Retribution Paladin and Feral Druid a little bit lower than mid, and then down in the bottom clump is Frost DK, Assassination Rogue, Subtlety Rogue, and Arms Warrior. I guess every warrior is electing to play Fury. Fury plays really fast. They have a no Raging Blow build with Annihilation, which is cool. It's fun. I think it makes it feel really good once you have good gear. And it's kind of all the rage. People are, pun intended, by the way. People are really excited about Fury. It's very popular, so you can see that. And then survival hunters, man, we gotta help them out. We gotta give them some love, man. Moving right along to Mythic Plus Ranged DPS class popularity. Ooh, Warlock Demonology, super high up. Listen, I am in shambles here. Fire and Affliction being this low hurts me because I feel like Affliction got so many awesome things going into Dragonflight. Now I haven't leveled my Warlock yet. Maybe this is just an efficacy thing. Maybe Affliction isn't doing well enough and people are avoiding it, but I really like the Affliction changes, and I hope to see more of them there. But at the very top, Demonology Devastation, Beast Mastery, dominating the Hunter charts for ranged. And this was actually, I think, I looked at some preliminary numbers prior to the launch. Beast Mastery was even higher. It was kind of up near Demonology. And I think that's because people are switching to Marksmanship. Marksman got a nice buff right before Season 1. I don't know how effective it was. We can look at the numbers separately in a different video, but Marksmanship is being picked a lot. And we're actually seeing it in some of the RWF pushes as well, which is cool. Balanced Druid, super popular Mythic Plus. Spoiler alert, see how this goes when we switch to Raid, but just kind of keep an eye on that. Arcane and Frost for Mage are about equal, in a little bit lower than halfway maybe. Kind of shocking. And then Fire down at the bottom, I guess people are just having this exodus. BFA and Shadowlands, people loved Fire. I guess they don't like the changes, or they're just not interested, or it's just not performing as well. Shadow Priest is lower. Actually, it's kind of higher than I thought it would be. I think Shadow Priest got some really cool, fun changes. It is a little bit more nuanced to play for some people, so maybe they don't enjoy that. But then again, so is Elemental. So is and Frost and Arcane Mage, I guess, kind of up there. But yeah, that Shadow Priest towards the bottom. Elemental is the final bastion before the drop off. I like the Elemental changes as well personally. And then the drop off happens. We have Destruction Warlock. And then towards the very bottom, we have Fire and Affliction. So that's Mythic Plus Ranged DPS. Now let's move on to Raid as we try to keep good pace on this. So this is going to be, we'll do normal Raid and then we'll do Heroic Raid. And I've intentionally excluded Mythic Raid just because I think it's going to be wildly inconsistent. And I think anyone that's doing Mythic the first week is probably just playing whatever is the best, which is not going to be as much of a representation of popularity. So on this one, we'll look at normal and heroic back to back on each of the categories just to see. I think normal is probably a better representation of the class popularity, and then heroic is kind of like more of the higher percentage of people that are doing heroic and completing it. What are they playing? And that's going to be closer to the mythic numbers of people playing what's good rather than what's popular. So starting with healer, Restoration Druid, way up at the top. Preservation Evoker, way up at the top. This is probably going to be for all of Season 1. I can't imagine this changing. You have the new hotness of the new healer with Evoker. Super fun, very different. Plays different from all the other healers, which is cool. Resto Druid is just super strong. And Resto Druids are almost always the top at the start of an expansion just because their toolkit is amazing, their throughput is reliable, and they're just good in raid. Now, number 3, Holy Priest has pushed down Holy Paladin from Mythic Plus. And that's because Holy Priests are just always goated in Raid. They have crazy good spread. They have actually 2 separate builds that they can run in Raid depending on the encounter. They still have their big Salvation. They still have their Benediction. They can still spread all the bouncies and leave lots of echoes and hots on people. And they have Symbol of Hope, which is always good. Holy Paladin, a little bit lower, but still popular. Pretty cool. And Holy Paladin always has the big toolkit. They're kind of like Resto Shaman Plus right now because they have Battle Res. Finally, they got, we have more than one healer that has Battle Res. So we have Holy Paladin on there. And then underneath that, we have Resto Shaman, which generally is pretty decent in raids. I mean, they are the kings and queens of stacked fights. They have a lot of ground AoEs that they can deal with and directionals like Wellspring. Spirit Link Totem can save certain encounters with certain mechanics. And they have just decent spread. They struggle with spread out just because sometimes you won't get range for chain heal to bounce, but in general have always been a decent build for raid. The shameful part about this is that their mastery allows them to heal more when people are lower HP, which favors early on content. So them being towards the bottom on early progression doesn't bode well for them in popularity. Followed by Mistweaver. Mistweaver is just throughput. I mean, they don't really have any major mechanical benefits that come with being a Mistweaver. They have a raid-wide cleanse, which no one else has, which is nice. And then they just have general throughput. I think they have some cool new things with Yu'lon. You can do some split fights with the Phelan if you want to. You can do the caster build, which has some cool stuff in it. But honestly, I would say even raid or M+, Preservation Evoker is kind of just like a souped up version of Mistweaver as it stands right now. And then Discipline at the bottom. And again, I'm holding on to my guns for this one. I think this is just a throughput problem. I feel like there maybe should have been a raid cooldown that would replace Spirit Shell. I mean, obviously they have the Gohan Dome, which is nice, but yeah, Discipline just not so hot in popularity. And we can compare that to the raid popularity for Heroic on Healer. It's basically the same. The only difference here is that Resto Druid takes more of the overall aggregate, and Holy Priest has moved up to replace Preservation Evoker. And again, as the difficulty goes higher, people play either what's better or what they are more comfortable with. And maybe they're just relying on Holy Priest more. Holy Priest is quite good. We'll talk about that in another video. But this is the comparison for Heroic relative to normal. Moving on to Tank, Protection Warrior, slamming it out. Super strong, very popular. And you can see this is actually, the middle is like the meat of the sandwich here is what's different for Raid relative to Mythic Plus. Protection Warrior is still the top, Brewmaster is still the bottom, but in the middle, things have swapped a good bit. Blood DK taking the slot over Vengeance. There's some cool things here. Not only do you get a battle res with Blood DK, which can change your roster up a little bit, or maybe even just have it available. They have anti-magic zone, which is really nice. They have great resistance to magic damage. There's plenty of magic damage in Vault of the Incarnates. So that's not too surprising. And they just generally have a lot of self-healing. They're very self-reliant relative to some of the other tanks that may need constant spot healing from healers. Vengeance Demon Hunter dropped. I mean, it was kind of like a statistical bump into second place, but now basically tied with Blood. And then down, you see Protection Paladin overtaking Guardian Druid. Protection Paladin, again, Paladins have Bop, they have Freedom, they have Bubble, they have plenty of ways that they can do some really awesome things, and they have plenty of good cooldowns that they can use as well. Whereas Guardian Druid, they just kind of bear it up, and that's what they do. They're very straightforward, but as the difficulty gets harder, sometimes that extra utility can come into clutch. And at the very bottom here, we have Brewmaster. Closer to the herd than in Mythic Plus, maybe just because it's a bigger group and there's less reliance on the individual tank. And Brewmaster can be quite good, but they are, at the end of the day, they are probably the squishiest tank as it stands right now. And maybe as gear improves or we find new builds, that might change. And we'll see that with the Heroic popularity. So relative to what we just saw in normal, Protection Warrior still the top. Brewmaster coming up. So you see Blood DK taking a little bit of a lead over Vengeance. So a little bit more on that value front. But Brewmaster now in the middle for Heroic. So as the difficulty goes higher, Brewmasters are being taken more. Maybe just as people get better at the class and they're able to manage their stagger and all the buttons that Brewmaster has in Dragonflight, it starts to scale up. And then I think Guardian Druid still about where it was. Protection Paladin fell a lot. And I think as you get higher in difficulty, people are able to cover the utility that you get from your tank with other roles. And so it becomes more about which tank can survive the best. And I still think Protection Paladin is a little undertuned right now. They're still quite squishy and very cooldown dependent. And sometimes those cooldowns just don't line up for raid encounters. Moving on to normal raid DPS popularity. Still somewhat similar to Mythic Plus, but there are some differences here. First off, you're going to see Havoc Demon Hunters in normal raids take the cake. Just super popular. Same thing goes for Fury Warrior. Those Warrior and Demon Hunter are just super popular at the launch here. And they're actually more so ahead of the pack in raid, in normal raid, than they were in Mythic Plus. They shine, or they're super fun, or they're super strong. They're both quite powerful right now and very good in cleave fights as well. Windwalker and Outlaw still in the same spot, but when it comes to raid, Enhancement Shaman has pushed down Unholy DK. Retribution Paladin has kind of left Feral Druid behind. We saw Ret and Feral on Mythic Plus relatively neck and neck, and in here in raid, Ret has kind of pushed further up. Maybe people just like having the extra durability that Retribution has over Feral, but there you go. Assassination Rogue much higher than in raid than in Mythic Plus. Not too surprising. Assassination has a lot of dots and ramp time, and if they can get one target to sit still and be alive, they can do some serious hurt. And it's pretty awesome. Further down is Subtlety. I guess the Blade Dance isn't enough, or maybe they're just not in a spot, or people just don't like playing Subtlety in a raid environment. Frost has come down a good bit, but still very heavily played. And then you have Arms Warrior doing quite better than Mythic Plus. Again, can really shine in a raid environment, but still quite low. And then at the very bottom, RIP Survival Hunter. The Survival Hunter believers are in shambles right now. Across the board, they are struggling. So hopefully we get some adjustments. But let's look at the heroic difficulty difference. As difficulty increases, we see some minor differences. We actually see Assassination Rogue start to push further up. Feral Druid goes further down. Ret Paladin further down. But you see Havoc, Demon Hunter, and Fury Warrior are still at the very top. Windwalker Outlaw are basically tied. Enhancement takes an even bigger leap away from Unholy DK. And then Frost DK still comes up a little bit, but still not in the running. Arms in Heroic Raid, far less popular. I would probably argue that this is more of an efficacy thing. It could just be that Arms just isn't doing well enough, and so people are picking it less in Heroic. Same for Subtlety, and then RIP Survival. And lastly, we have Normal and Heroic Vault of the Incarnates for our ranged DPS specs. Demonology still at the top. Beast Mastery still at the top, but you can see that Marksmanship has come down from its position relative to Mythic Plus. Devastation Evoker doing really well. Balanced Druid up from Mythic Plus as well. And what's interesting is we actually do see Arcane Mage start to overtake some of the middle of the pack here, catching up to Marksmanship Hunter for normal raid. Shadow Priest higher than Mythic Plus as well. Elemental a little higher. Destruction a little higher. And then Fire and Affliction still down at the bottom. So overall, at a wide swath, it does mirror the damaged classes that we're seeing taken into Mythic Plus, at least in the start of the season. We'll see how metas pick up and how people play, but we'll save that for another video on how strong classes are. This is just popularity. And as difficulty increases, there's a very interesting change here. Arcane Mage shooting way up. We're actually in the Racer World first. We're seeing a lot of Arcane Mages. Their rotation is very simple. Their damage opportunities are really high, and they do have a lot of flexibility. Demonology going even higher in Heroic Raid. They are just, they own this chart, essentially. Beast Mastery going up one, kind of pushing down Devastation Evoker. Very reliable. Balanced Druid as well. Marksmanship lower, and then Shadow and Elemental kind of hold their spot. Frost Mage dropping, Destruction Warlock dropping, and then again down at the bottom. Deviations below is Fire Mage and Affliction Warlock. When it comes to DPS, utility is less of a thing. It's more about, obviously, it's nice to have a Warlock for portals for some effects. You definitely want to be able to immune with Ice Block or Turtle or things like that. But I think DPS more than the other roles, it comes down to how good you are. How much hurt can you inflict with your abilities in a short period of time for the encounter, and I think that's kind of where we're going to see it. So that is the split. I'll save the meta discussions for another video. I don't want this one to get too long, but this is the class popularity week 1 season launch of Dragonflight. Where did anything surprise you? Are there classes or specs that are in a spot that you didn't think they would be for week 1? Is your spec on here, and is it where you thought it would be? Are there buffs or nerfs or changes in popularity you'd like to see? Let me know down in the comments. And if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi, or else you have stinky feet. I'll see you in the next one. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.